Mike Tomlin spoke to the media today and alluded to the fact that Russell Wilson, veteran quarterback who has been out for the past couple of weeks with a calf injury, took last week of practice to knock off the Russ, quote-unquote, and it's basically in consideration that he might be the starter this coming week against the New York Jets. The Steelers, sitting at 4-2, have seen success, whether you want to admit it or not, with Justin Fields as the interim quarterback. But all of a sudden, now Mike Tomlin is throwing the ball back in the ring here, and both names are back in the hat. And at this point, it's fun. It's one thing to do this in training camp. It is another thing to do this when you're 4-2, 6 weeks into the year. What's your reaction to what Tomlin's doing? Is this just another Mike Tomlin screwing with the media type of persona here, or is he really doing a quarterback competition mid-year like this?
I don't think he's going to do that. And this isn't my biggest take on this isn't a Mike Tomlin thing. You know what I mean? You're 4-2. The division is still wide open. I understand the Ravens are playing better. The Bengals are a mess. The Browns are a mess. Why change what's working? And I'm not necessarily a believer in the Steeler offense and Justin Fields, but I think Justin Fields is better than Russell Wilson. Let's not get this twisted, okay? I understand that Justin turned the ball over a lot in Chicago, and I think that was more or less the product of the situation. I think that offense was a mess under Luke Getsy and not enough weapons and whatever. While on the other hand, Russell Wilson, I mean, he's a game manager. He'll win you some games, but I think Fields, with his threat of rushing, with his threat of scrambling, and I believe it or not, I think Fields throws a better spiral and a better deep ball. This does not sound like something Mike Tomlin would actually do, pulling his starting quarterback and putting in a glue, and with all due respect, a glue factory Russell Wilson while your team is 4-2. And to add another layer to it, what happens if you throw Russell Wilson in, he struggles, you lose a couple games, what, you're going to pull him back out?
That's the biggest problem.
Yeah, you can't do that.
That is the biggest problem.
You can't do that.
Now, I think Russell Wilson's won a Super Bowl with this type of team, and he did it in Seattle, and I know it was freaking 12 years ago. But the idea is Russell Wilson has had playoff success. He's been there. He's done that. He's wildly more experienced, and he's a veteran. So I understand it from that perspective if this was 6 weeks ago. But all of a sudden, now we're in week 6, and the team has seen success. And I wouldn't say the team is seeing success exclusively because of Justin Fields. I would say he's maybe a minor part in it. But we know that that team can win with a plethora of quarterbacks under center. And I think Tomlin knows that, and I think he's playing into that. But Russell Wilson, it wasn't it was an ugly year last year. It wasn't the worst year of all time. He showed that he could still do it to some degree. I think he just butted heads with Sean Payton. If he's able to,
Well, and they wanted to get out of that contract,
and that contract was a nightmare. So I think this is a little different, but this is all from the perspective of starting the year like this. You're already rolling. The ball's already here. To your point, what are you going to do? You're going to bench Fields. I wouldn't say kill his confidence, but you're going to throw him out of rhythm, throw the offense out of rhythm, and all of a sudden, if this doesn't work, you lose 3 straight. You're sitting there at 4-5 now. You can't make another move to put Fields back in and just flip-flop the starting quarterbacks all year long. You can't do it. You're going to have to stick with one.
Two things. You mentioned Wilson and the playoff success. And yes, he has had success, but we were far away separated than that. Agreed?
Sure.
We were far away from Wilson.
But it was a great defense, and you knows how to utilize a roster. That's what Russell Wilson is good at. That Bronco roster was not great. I'll
agree with that.
Wilson knows how to utilize a roster, and he doesn't play hero ball. And Fields has a problem sometimes with trying to play some hero ball.
I could argue, and then the number 2 I was going to say is I mentioned Fields and his struggles in Chicago, turning the ball over, lost fumbles and interceptions. He hasn't really turned the ball over this year.
No,
he has 1 interception on the passing end. I know he's got a couple of fumbles, but the 1 interception, 5 touchdowns, like, you live with that. You'll live with that. I think Fields will bring more to the table than as I said, glue factory Russell Wilson. I
don't think this is a ceiling thing?
I think Tomlin, to your point, is blowing smoke to the media. I think this is him kind of screwing with whoever he's playing. I forget who the Steelers' opponent is this week.
He's going to get
I
first
think this
team
is
reps.
head games.
He's saying he's going to get first-team reps. That's the problem.
This is all head games.
But the media will be at practice.
Oh, of course.
So they're going to see
it. Of course.
So he's not just doing it for head games.
What I'm saying is just because Russell Wilson is getting first-team reps doesn't mean he's going to start the game. Justin has been getting first-team reps since 2 weeks left in training camp.
Hold on.
When
that
Wilson
doesn't make any
was
sense. That's a stupid game to play. If you're not going to, I believe at the very least there was some consideration for Russell Wilson to be the starting quarterback, because why would you give him first-team reps, damage that out of Fields, who is still learning a relatively new offense for him, just so you could blow smoke to the media? That doesn't make any sense. You're gonna if you're going to do this, either Wilson's going to be the backup and you're just going to stick with that. But I understand if you were to say that and nobody would see it, but people are going to see this.
I think the reps and whatever, I think all that stuff's a little overrated personally.
You can't say that because
I think all that
the
stuff
offenses
is a little
didn't figure this out until 2 weeks ago. That's
I
all
think
because of the reps in practice.
they're both going to be getting reps in practice against whatever scout team defense that the Jets are going to be playing coming up this Sunday night. I think this is to get Russ into rhythm, to get him possibly ready.
Well, let's think
to
about
come
it.
in. I think
the biggest problem with the offense is we talked about these teams don't practice enough. Now practice is overrated to you? That was the whole reason that the offense is stunk through 4 weeks, is these teams did not practice enough. And now it doesn't matter. These guys can just show up on Sundays.
It's not that it doesn't matter. It's just Justin's in a swing of things. I think he's in a swing of things in practice. I know he's a relatively new quarterback in Pittsburgh, but he has a general understanding of what's going on. It's just because they're going to be splitting or whatever the hell the report was, first-team reps and this and that, they're going to be facing whatever scout team defense is that they're going to be running for the Jets. I don't know. I don't think – long story short for me, Colin, I don't think there's a chance in hell Russell Wilson is starting. I think this is all smoke, and you can't bench a guy that's 4-2. He could say one thing to the media. I'm just not buying it.
I agree.
Maybe I'm just flat out wrong, part of it. I ain't buying this.
I agree with the philosophy of you can't bench somebody who's 4-2. That I agree with. But I think the idea that this means nothing, I don't agree with that either. I think
but I also think, Colin, we've been hearing that Wilson is close. He's coming back. He's going to be good. I feel like we've been hearing this garbage for a long time now.
So now we've done a couple of the fact that he hasn't been hurt, but they just wanted to bench him?
I'm not alluding to the fact that he wasn't hurt. I'm just alluding to just because he's almost on his way back and getting reps. I'm not buying into this situation at all. I'm not buying into Tomlin. Oh, he's going to be getting first-team reps and he might be in line to start against the Jets. I think it's ludicrous.
Well, the one thing that was for sure was everybody was under the impression that Wilson was going to be that starter in the offseason. Of course, you can't. You can only hypothesize to a certain degree, but Wilson really got hurt before there was a chance to make an official decision.
I'm not saying that this is he was never hurt. They just don't want him to play. I'm not saying that. I think Wilson was hurt, but your the best thing you could offer to someone or a franchise or a job is availability. And he wasn't available, and the team's 4-2 now. You can't screw up what you started just because, Russell, let's stop everything that we've been doing. Russell Wilson's healthy. Now we got to throw him in there.
I agree. It's dangerous. But the one thing I will say that I understand from the Wilson perspective, but my perspective here, if I was a head coach, this is what I was thinking of before the year. Now it's a little different. Now it's a tricky spot, and it's hard to go back and forth. You can't flip-flop. But in terms of ceiling, I think Russell Wilson probably gives you that higher ceiling. Fields is good. Fields offers you a lot with his legs. But if Fields doesn't offer you a lot with his arm, he never has and he never will. That's just not the quarterback that Justin Fields is. Wilson, on the other hand, is experienced. He has a little bit more with his arm. He's not the rushing threat, so I understand that facet. But I'm not going to sit here and say that the Steelers' offense was fantastic the last couple weeks because of Justin Fields. I think this is a team that is a well-rounded roster, especially defensively. And in terms of situational coaching, has been top of the line for years now in terms of getting the most out of everything else and not the quarterback. So I think in terms of a ceiling, I understand the perspective that Russell Wilson might give you that next step. But I think it's a risky move. It's extremely risky right now, 4-2, with the Ravens creeping up now. But you get the Browns and the Steelers, who haven't been doing that too well. The AFC has been really chalked and barred so far this year. But from that perspective, I understand the ceiling aspect of it.
I just think you ride this out. Say Fields loses 2 games, 3 games in a row. You go to 4-5. You go to 4-4. Then pull the plug. Then play Russ.
I don't understand that.
Let Fields play himself out of the position. I think he's deserved a start at the quarterback position, even with the healthy Russell Wilson being with the record of 4-2. I personally don't think Wilson gives you a better chance to win. I think Fields gives you the better chance to win.
Well, I mean, Wilson's a year removed from 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and winning 8 games. And that's with the team that wasn't that good and a head coach he was butting heads with a terrible contract, and it was just a whole nightmare to deal with. This is a better coach team. This is a wildly experienced.
Sean Payton's a good coach, though.
He is, and I just don't think he butted heads with Russell Wilson. I don't think that the Sean Payton, dictatorship that he likes to run, I don't think that just really flew.
To your point, I think he got a bad taste in his mouth when he showed up to Denver and saw Russell Wilson's personal office, personal whatever that parking spots.
You're talking about
nightmare.
Fields playing himself out. Fields has
Yeah.
played 6 games this year. He has thrown over 200 yards twice. He has thrown over 300 yards once, and he has been under 150 yards 3 times passing. So I understand the legs aspect to it, but you're thinking about playing himself out. What is that point? Them losing games?
I think so.
They've showed that they could win games without the quarterback. So I think if there's anything there, I would say that Tomlin is trying to put the team in a position to win with the quarterback when they needs to, and that they don't want to live with the 9 and 8s of the world that they've dealt with.
You think they'd be better with Wilson?
Yes.
Okay.
I agree with the philosophy 100% that this is the bad move. But ultimately, if this was 6 weeks ago and I had to make the decision for a year-long basis, I think Wilson 100% would be the better option at quarterback comparatively to Fields. Because the experience. They're trying to win playoff games. They're not trying to get to the postseason. They've been getting to the postseason. They are trying to win postseason games. They have the defense for it. Win a postseason game. Wilson has done that. And that is the one perspective that I have that Fields doesn't necessarily have. How is Fields going to fare in a playoff game when they start locking down that run game? Is he going to beat you with his arm? You're going to need a quarterback. Every team in the league needs one. They need a quarterback that is going to beat them with your arm. And
you think that's Wilson? I don't think it's.
Hold on. But comparatively to what? Is Fields going to do that? I just gave you the stats. He hasn't thrown for 150. He's not going to do it with his arm. That is just not the quarterback that he is. And all of a sudden, when everything tightens up and you're in a tight wild card matchup game on the road, all of a sudden you're going to need him to go down the field with 3 minutes to go. I'd rather have Wilson. I think that's a no-brainer.
I think Wilson dinks and dunks, and I know Fields does as well. All right, I know Fields does as well, but I think with Russ at this point in his career, he's going to hit the check down. He's going to try to dink and dunk himself down the field. At least Fields, and to your point, you said what happens when they shut down the run, Riz. I think his threat, this point with Fields, the threat with his legs is more, I think, enticing to the Steelers than anything Russell Wilson has.
You're talking about Fields as a runner versus a passing.
I rather take the threat that Fields has with his legs and his ability to improvise than what Wilson has at this point. Now, I'm not a Russ. I thought Russell Wilson was done 3 years ago. So that's where I'm at on this spectrum. I laughed as a Brown fan. Laughed to kingdom come when they got Russell Wilson. I was
26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions,
that they would start Russell Wilson.
A quiet 8 games last year. I agree he's a little out of his prime, but in terms of rather having Justin Fields running the ball, when has that ever worked? Lamar is maybe an outlier, and Lamar can't win playoff games. So that is not a foundation. That is not a recipe for success at the NFL level. What is the recipe for success? You need somebody who could win the game in the fourth quarter, win the game with their arm, has a little bit of a clutch factor. Russell Wilson has had a lot of clutch victories in his career.
5 years ago.
Sure.
5 years ago.
But he's been there. That's fine. If Fields has never been there. And that to me, I think that is what Tomlin is probably looking for. I'm just trying to get into his head here. This is not me making.
No, I understand. So let's go to the point of Fields hasn't been there. If you're the Steelers, don't you want to find out if he's a possible franchise quarterback? Isn't that why you got him in the first place? You got him on a discount. Let him play out. Let him get into these tough situations, see what he's made of, and then make a decision at the end of the year. You already know what you have with Russell Wilson.
That's true, but you don't have games to use in his experiment. They've seen them in practice. We don't really know how it's been in practice. Both quarterbacks did not play great in the preseason. We both know that. So if they're sitting there in practice and thinking, okay, Justin Fields is not really getting it done with his arm, and he hasn't really been up to par, up to speed with what we want to see out of a passing perspective. Now they see that. They're not going to use games as an experiment when they're 4-2. I think they're going to do this because we think ceiling-wise, this is probably our best perspective.